like, I don't think I belong here.
From a very young age, my parents really showed us through their actions how important education was. So math was really the basis of it.
I have my little YouTube channel, Just No Glaze, about finance.
Honestly, that role that I was just describing was the hardest job I ever had.
Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Dre and Smiley, The Inner Circle podcast.
Yvonne Harris is a dynamic first-generation college graduate from the west side of Chicago in Oak Park. With a passion for numbers and financial acumen, she earned her accounting degree graduating cum laude from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and became a certified public accountant. After an eye-opening experience in the Treasurer's Department, Yvonne delved into finance, pursuing her MBA with a concentration in finance at the Kelley School of Business, Indiana University. Thanks to a prestigious fellowship from the Consortium of Graduate Study in Management, she had the opportunity to study abroad in Barcelona, Spain, enriching her global perspective. Throughout her impressive 20-year career, Yvonne has excelled in diverse finance and analytical roles within the pharmaceutical industry. Currently, she thrives in a finance position supporting North America in a prominent life sciences company. Beyond her professional achievements, Yvonne finds fulfillment in giving back to her community. She has a strong, long-standing history of volunteering and currently serves at a local food pantry. Advocating for empowerment and progress, she firmly believes in lifting as we climb. Outside of work and community service, Yvonne indulges in her passions for food and music. As a self-professed foodie and music lover, she appreciates the finer things in life and embraces the joy they bring. Yvonne, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. So let me start off with my first question here, which is, tell us about, graduating from college at the top of your class, right? I can remember
high school from the top.
Listen, top of any class is an accomplishment. I remember elementary school. I remember middle school, high school, college. I did not graduate from the top of any class I was in. Okay,
Nor I.
So don't diminish the accomplishment. So tell me this. So at a young age, high school, right?
Yeah.
The drive, the passion to succeed at such a young age, high school. Where does it come from?
Mm-hmm. I really think it came from my parents. My sister and I grew up on the west side of Chicago, inner city, until we were kind of preteen age. But my parents, neither of them graduated from college or attended college. So from a very young age, my parents really showed us through their actions how important education was. My sister and I, we were bused to a magnet school from the west side of Chicago. So we had probably an hour and a half ride each way to get to school in the morning, because we'd pick up lots of different kids along the way. And, that messaging started very early in our lives. And then when we were in high school, we moved to the suburbs so that we could be in a good community for the school system, one of the reasons why we moved. And that message of the importance of education was always around us. And so I watched my parents work very hard and sacrifice a lot so that we could have a good education. And that is what they knew and thought would be the key to a better life for my sister and I. So that messaging was instilled in us at a very young age.
Yeah, as you share that, something that I was talking to my son about recently is exposure, right? And so,
yes.
Some of us we're all born with a different deck of cards, right? Different hand of
Mm-hmm.
cards, right? Some of us are
Sure.
born
Yeah.
in families where, both parents are highly educated. Some of us are born in families where, they're scraping to get by, and then you have everything in
Mm-hmm.
between. And
Right.
the key, regardless of what hand you're dealt, is the exposure, right? And so it's clear to me through
Mm-hmm.
the story you just shared that your parents exposed you guys to, hey, this is our life. It's a good life, but there's more than that, right? And
Oh,
you
absolutely.
can achieve that through education. So I'm glad you shared that story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you developed an interest in accounting and finance. Tell me where that
Mm-hmm.
came from.
It was really more an interest in math.
Okay.
So math was always my favorite subject throughout my whole elementary and high school career. So math was really the basis of it. And then in high school, I took an accounting class and, I was good at it. And, I didn't really know, honestly. I just kind of picked it.
Okay.
It
Okay.
sounded good. I heard good
Okay.
things about it.
Okay.
And I did well in the class and I just chose that. And it opened up a lot of different doors. I actually never worked as strictly an accountant. My first job was in internal auditing, which, is a good accounting is a good basis for really any business career.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are a lot of different avenues you can take with accounting. So I started in internal auditing and at an energy company in my area, our local gas company. And then after that, I moved to the treasurer's department of that same company and got exposed to finance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I kind of said, this is interesting. I kind of like this.
Mm-hmm.
I was exposed to cash management and investing. And originally I thought I wanted to be an investment manager or something in that realm.
Yeah.
So when I went to graduate school, that was what I was thinking I was going to do. But as I learned more, I was kind of I don't know if I want to do that because that field is so, it's not very diverse, not a lot of women. I don't know if I would be comfortable in that kind of environment. And so I went the corporate route. So really the basis was math, but it kind of, I guess, blossomed into something else after that.
No, this is fascinating. For our listeners, I like the way you described the accounting to the treasurer to the audit. In our world, it seems like that word treasurer, you don't really have a treasury department anymore. You have CFO, chief financial officers, or
Yeah.
you may have a CRO, chief revenue officer.
Yeah.
But a treasurer, if you can you define the role of a treasurer as opposed to an accountant, as opposed to a CFO, or is it just the title changed over the time? It's the same functions.
Well, okay, so I'll just explain what the treasurer's department was responsible for. So in my first job out of undergrad, the treasurer's department was responsible for all of the cash management of the company. So they, the cash manager in the department did all of the investing of the company's cash. So they would be, on the phone talking with different brokers and dealers and making sure they made the safest and best investments with the company's cash to grow it, to safeguard it, to account for it, etc. So the treasurer was the head of that department. They also had analysts, which is what I was, in the department that did analytics or analysis on capital investment projects. So looking at the ROI, return on investment of projects within the company to see if they were good investments. Also, one thing that I worked on, which I thought or two things that I worked on that really intrigued me and got me interested in finance was I was responsible for a small fund that we had that was backed by bonds. So ever so often I'd have bonds maturing and I'd have to call the broker and reinvest those funds to continue to grow those dollars for the company. And the other thing I worked on when I was in that department was a dividend analysis. So I basically worked on an analysis that yielded a result that told the treasurer, okay, this is how much we should pay to our stockholders via a dividend. And I thought that was really interesting and cool.
Yeah.
And I was very intrigued that they would allow me to work on such projects being so young and so green. So that's kind of, the summary or summarization of what happens within the Treasurer's Department.
This is so intriguing because Dre and I we had some private equity guys, and they talk about what they do by raising capital. And then I was speaking, I have my little YouTube channel, Just No Glaze, about finance. And I say, you want dividend paying stocks, but I've never in my experience met anyone who, like, Apple pays a dividend of what, $2, but no one ever is behind the curtains. Like, what's the ingredients for coming up with that $2 versus $1.50 versus $1 for a dividend?
Right.
That's so.
Yeah.
From a high level, we have some people on our channel who are interested in. Just if you could break it down in layman's term, what is it like? Say, oh, Dre, we just got an extra $1 million. Dre's like, I think we should have a 50-cent dividend. No, Kevin's like, no, 25. Don't give him 20, 50 cents. Give him 25. What is not the mechanics, just like from a high level perspective, what's that conversation like? Is it a lot of give and push to stockholders calling you up, like, give us more dividends? And you're like, no.
Honestly, it was so long ago. I don't remember the real nitty gritty details of the analysis, but there was an analysis that I did that looked at like our competitors, and I can't remember the exact details of what I analyzed, but I do remember I did look at our competitors and what they were doing and that sort of thing. So it's a very complex process. It's well thought out, and I'm sure there was conversation beyond me, in the C-suite before it was approved. But that was kind of a starting point of the conversation.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so eventually that led you to, and what industry was that in exactly, that first?
So it was in the energy industry. I worked for Nicor Gas, our local utility company in my area.
Okay, and now you're in the life sciences space.
I am.
Yeah. So tell me about the role that you do there. Tell me how you transitioned from that role you had with energy into working in the space of life science. Yeah.
Well, in between that, so I started in energy, and then I went back to school to obtain my MBA. So I went to graduate school, and my concentration was finance at that point because I had gotten that exposure in my first job out of undergrad and was like, hey, I really like this, right? And thought that maybe I would do something in the investment space because I was exposed to it in my first job, and then kind of backed away from that and said, yeah, I want to do something where there would be a little more diversity in my colleagues and the people I'm working with. So I went the corporate route, and I worked probably, a little over 2 decades in the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay. So
I was working at various pharma companies, one that everybody would know of, Abbott Laboratories, in their corporate finance group. So most of my roles were just supporting different areas of the company, like research and development, sales and marketing, managed markets, different functions within the company, but supporting them from a financial planning and analysis standpoint. So basically building their budgets, making sure they stay on track with their budgets and the commitments that they've made to the company, doing analysis that would help support decision making. I took a role in pricing at one point in one of my companies. So it wasn't finance, but it was still analytical in nature. So in pricing, I supported a group of sales folks that called on managed care organizations. So when I say managed care, I mean like your insurance companies like Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Kaiser, those, and even hospitals and clinics and the government like Medicare and Medicaid, pharmaceutical companies have to strike deals with those organizations so that we can get access, right, on their plans. It's called formulary access, right? And that determines how much you pay as a customer for your prescription drugs. So best case is you want to be at the highest level on those formularies because that's the best deal for the company and that's the best deal for you as a customer. And we would, as a pharmaceutical company, pay, or I'm trying to put this in layman's terms, we would give these managed care companies and hospitals, clinics, the government discounts on the price of our drugs to give us access. And that's basically how sales happen in the pharmaceutical world.
Give and take.
So I did the give or take, and I would do the analytics behind those deals and present them to our senior management on behalf of the sales folks that I supported. So I did those kind of roles. And I'm sorry, I don't remember what your question was.
That's good. That's good because I have a follow-up to my initial question. So you mentioned that you're trying to put it in layman's terms. Let me just pause for a second. You could be a professor. Like everything you're saying, I'm tracking. It's because I'll be honest with you. Math, economics, and accounting. You might as well start speaking Greek because it's a different language. It's a different language. But
honestly, go ahead.
No, honestly,
that role that I was just describing was the hardest job I ever had because it was like a different world, the language, the terminology. I'd be in meetings and I'd have no idea what they were talking about. Like, what is a formulary? What is a step? What is a prior authorization? What is this stuff?
Right.
So that was the hardest job I ever had, but I probably learned the most.
Well, and that was going to be our follow-up because as you were describing the role, you touched, it seemed like almost every area of the company as it related to what you did in finance. And so how did that prepare you? Talk about it sounds like it may have even catapulted you to the next level. And I guess the question is, how did that occur? So for example, I'll give you an example. I know someone who worked in the healthcare industry. While they worked there, they had an opportunity to work in IT, supply chain, clinical services. They worked with business partners. And so before getting into that industry, healthcare, their initial thought was, oh, it's just patient care. And so once they got in there, like you mentioned, they'd go into meetings and things and like, what are they talking about? But they figured it out, they paid their dues, et cetera. Yeah. And what ended up happening is that they realized that, whoa, now I have a whole set of new skills I can use because I can speak the language. I can almost go in any direction I want to go in, with these skills. And while it was challenging, et cetera, it kind of helped catapult them to the next level. And they realized there was a next level beyond this. Did you have any similar experience coming out of that role?
I would say yes, because in that role, it was very challenging in the sense that it was high pressure, which was good and bad. Good in that, it taught me that I could handle it. Bad in that, after a certain period of time, it just wears on anybody because you're human, right? You get burnt out. But that role, I had quite a bit of autonomy. So that was good in that it honed those independent skills, that it honed those independent decision-making skills. I had to do presentations bi-weekly to senior management. So it honed that skill set. I really hate presenting, but it was a good learning experience, and also to sit in a room with senior leaders and be able to anticipate the questions and have the answer ready
and speak their language.
And also present yourself in such a way that you're taken seriously, that you're valued and credible, all those things, right? So that did catapult my skill set in that way. And also, the question you asked me, now I remember, was how did it lead to life sciences? So all that experience in the pharmaceutical industry, I realized I really like this space. I like working in the healthcare space because it's an important industry. It's an industry that's always going to be needed. It's an industry that helps people live better lives. It's interesting. So it let me know that I really like that industry. So when I left the pharmaceutical industry, it wasn't really like planned. I was really just looking for a different company with a better culture. And I happened to land at my next company, which is Waters Corporation. And the tagline of that company is science that matters. So we deal in science that matters. So our biggest client for my company are pharmaceutical companies. So my past experiences kind of indirectly related to what my current company does, in that the products that they make serve the pharmaceutical industry primarily.
Okay. Yeah. So one quick comment, and I'll pass it over to Smiley here. You mentioned the pressure of that prior role. There's a phrase I shared with my son recently, and pressure busts pipes and makes diamonds, right? Pressure. And so, in my mind, I was trying to share, when I was sharing that with him, I was saying, you have, a couple options. You can give up and say, I can't make it through. Or you can figure out, how can I, with being mindful of my mental state, right? Giving yourself the mental care you need. How can I make it through this? And so I can then make a pivot. You clearly, turned into a diamond and, leveraged the opportunity into where you are now. And, and so congrats there on making that transition.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Smiley.
A few times while you were speaking, you mentioned diversity. So throughout, you were always seeking a diverse culture or something, an environment, it seems, that was similar to the diversity you desired. Did you find that, or is it a journey, or is it an insight?
I honestly, it varied based on company. But in the corporate finance field, there are not many Black women or men, honestly. So usually I'm one of very few, maybe one of two, maybe one of one. So it's a very lonely function from that standpoint. And that makes it hard. But given my background, right, going back to my educational background, growing up, I lived, for a portion of my life in an all Black neighborhood, but I was bused to a magnet school where I went to school with all different kinds of people. And when I moved to Oak Park, my high school was predominantly, white people. So, and then when I went to college, same thing, it's very diverse. So I was used to, not seeing people like me or interacting with people who didn't look like me and who were from different backgrounds. So from that, I'm sorry.
Code switching?
Yeah, switching, if you will. So I was used to wearing like different faces, right? So it wasn't really foreign to me. It's something that I would hope, like, if you see one other person that looks like you get so excited, like, oh my God, another Black person, oh my God, you're going to be my friend,
Right.
Seriously. But unfortunately, that's the reality that we live in,
I only ask that because I'm going to make a statement and follow up. Over the weekend, this past week, I just came in from driving from San Antonio to Tampa last night. But I took my daughter to Xavier, HBCU in New Orleans. Beautiful campus. It's so small and quaint, but it was, every HBCU I walk on, it's just like it's like a family reunion, even though I didn't know anyone.
You feel the love.
Exactly. And the ironic part is that
Yes.
my daughter had her girlfriend, and she's like, "That's a girl who went to my school." We're like, "What?" And we pulled over, and it was a girl who graduated from her school here in Tampa two
Oh,
years ago.
wow.
And she's like, "Ansley," she hugged her. Like, oh, what's the odds of seeing that?
Right,
And
right.
so I mentioned that to say, I'm going to try and phrase this question. Imagine Yvonne at 22, 23 at an HBCU or even at her university studying
Yeah.
accounting. How would you speak to yourself or any young person of color that's a lady or a male, because you said there's not many of us there? What would you tell them? Go into treasury, go into finance, or go into accounting, go into internal auditing, or what would you say? It's going to get better. Just come on in. Or what would you charge them? Because they want diversity. They want to see other people like
Mhm,
them. What would you say to yourself if you were 22, 23 and get ready to jump into the ocean of corporate
mhm.
America?
I honestly would say do what you love. You know, I would say
Do
do
what
what
you
you
love.
love, follow your heart, because if you do what you love, then you'll never work a day in your life. And I wish that somebody had told me that. Like, my sister and I, like I said, we were first generation
Mm.
college graduates, my sister and I. And, my dad and my mom, my mother worked in the insurance industry all of her career in clerical positions. My dad had many jobs. He was very talented, but he landed in the trucking industry. So he drove, a truck for Jewel Foods, which was our local
Mhm.
grocery chain, for most of his
Mm.
career. And my dad like hated his jobs. Like he was always like moving around, but he
Mm.
stuck with that because it was, he was good at it and he made good money, without having a college degree. But I wish that somebody had told us, like, follow your heart, do what you love, because you'll naturally be good at that.
Mm.
You'll naturally be good at what you love, and you'll want
Mm.
to learn more and be better at it. And it won't feel like a chore, and it won't feel like, oh, I gotta go to work. You'll be energized. It's like follow what gives you energy. If you don't understand what you like, well then assess what makes you happy, like what gives you energy, like what do you find yourself just spending hours and hours on that you could make into a career. That's what I would tell a young person, honestly.
Yvonne, the life coach.
You want to become a life coach.
You should.
It's fun.
You should.
You
Hey,
should.
listen.
You
I'm ready to
should.
sign up now. You're a natural. You're a
Let me tell
natural.
you.
I have my book here.
Let's do it.
I already see the title of your podcast. The title of your podcast is "Do
Right.
What You Love," and the
And
shirt "Do What You Love."
that could be the title of your life coach business as well.
Yeah,
Do what you love.
My God. Do I have to give you guys royalties on that?
You know it. Yes, you do.
No,
yeah,
we don't want it.
Trademarking it after the show. I'm running to trademark that.
see, he's the one asking for dividends. I'm like, no, just do it. No, I really like this. Do what you love and what makes you happy, because if you follow your heart, like you say, it's never work. It's just doing what you enjoy.
Your work is your
And,
play, Yeah.
So the other question I was going to ask was more about, let's say, our culture, our Black people in America. Since you're financially astute, experienced, expert, what would you say to young people who are they're doing what they love, but I don't know how to get into investing? And not that you're a financial expert or planner, you're giving advice, but what would you tell to yourself, like, start buying dividend stocks, or read this book, or just learn, or talk to Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, or what would you say to a young person who's coming out of college? They have a good job, but they have no one in their family with financial experience. They were probably the first one that had a checking account. Believe it or not, so many families still deal with these pay here, buy here, pay here stuff, and they don't even have bank accounts. What would you say to a young person that's first generation? No one in her family understands her, but she's trying to pull the whole herd of everyone up to some sort of financial literacy.
I would say, the good thing is you're part of a generation who has information at your fingertips. Like you can YouTube anything, you can YouTube how to change a tire. You can YouTube how to cook, something for dinner. I would just start by researching, right? Researching YouTube, Google it. So the best part about this technology age is that there's a wealth of information at your fingertips. So I would say that's one avenue. The other avenue is to, maybe look at a mentor, like look to a mentor or someone, maybe you have a cousin or you have an aunt or an uncle or a friend, family friend, someone in your church or a coach, a teacher who, may be able to help you. You might be able to ask them, hey, do you know anything about stocks or mutual funds? And most people they would love to share, information that they have or knowledge that they have. The other thing, I was actually a financial coach. It's funny that you brought up coaching. And I worked with this organization called the Center for Economic Progress. And they were piloting a program where people could sign up to be a part of this program and they would be coached on achieving financial goals. And as a coach, I had a client that I worked with on a weekly basis. We set up SMART goals, which means,
Specific,
they're
measurable, action, time bound, and responsible.
Responsible.
No, wait. Specific, measurable,
measurable,
achievable,
reasonable,
and time bound.
Exactly. Bingo.
Okay.
Wow. You attended her class, Dre?
Yes, sir. It was worth every penny.
So we would set up a SMART goal for them to achieve during the program. I think the program was like 8 to 10 weeks, something like that. And every week we get together, we go through different financial tools like tracking expenses, that sort of thing, working on improving their credit, that sort of thing to get them to achieve that specific goal that they set. And at the end of the program, if they achieve that goal, this program would give them $500 and they would graduate, they'd get a certificate. So look for a program like that. There's so many programs out there that you probably don't even know of. You could just Google, a lot of not-for-profit organizations have programs like that. I know, for example, the YWCA in Evanston has a financial literacy program that people can sign up for. So you just have to do some research, reach out to people they might be able to tell you about different resources. I had a friend just recently, yesterday actually, asked me, do you know anything about day trading? And I was like, actually, I don't. And they said, is that something you'd be interested in learning? I was like, actually, yeah, I would. So this, he and I are going to learn about day trading. I've ordered a book off of Amazon, Day Trading for Dummies.
Great.
There you go.
Awesome.
So that would be my advice.
So as you
Thank
share
you.
that in terms of what you have done in the community, I think back about the what I read in your bio, lifting as we climb. Tell me more about that motto and how you apply that in the work you do in the community. What does that motto mean?
So that motto means, as I advance, right, in my life, as a, just a human being in this world, I really believe like to those, what's the phrase? Like something like to those who are.
To those who much is given, much is expected.
Much is given, much is.
Okay.
Say it again.
Something. It's expected,
right. So the more you have, the more you should give.
Yeah.
That's the basic premise.
Sure.
I believe that.
Yeah.
My parents modeled that for me and my sister. My parents did a lot of community. My father passed away when I was in college, but he was always doing like volunteer work with different organizations. My mother, when she retired, she worked with the food pantry, the same one that I worked with in our neighborhood, and she put in so many hours. She ended up being the volunteer of the year 1 year. So it's always modeled from my sister and I. So it's always been in my face. So I believe that, as you have something, you share it, right? That's, to me, I believe that's why we're put on this earth. We're put on, I think Martin Luther King said, that's the price service is the price that you pay for living in this world. So when you serve, you get something back. It's like the more you give, the more you feel good about yourself and just period. So a lot of people will say, well, if you're depressed, go out and do something for somebody else, because it takes your mind off of your own worries and you're putting good energy, you're putting good energy into the world, and that comes back to you. At least that's what I think. So I think, we got to help each other, right? That's the only way we can improve this world that we live in.
I love that motto, lifting as we climb. And that clearly encapsulates the person that we've seen so far and heard so far on this podcast. Another question for you. I have two more, then we'll kick off the final four. So your background, and this is a little kind of more as it relates to the world today, right? So with your background in finance and accounting, what are your thoughts? These are just general thoughts, no advice, nothing political, anything like that. I'm asking, so don't feel uncomfortable. I don't feel uncomfortable. What are your thoughts on the current state of the U.S. economy?
I think that it's troubling. It's troubling when you hear about people, losing their jobs, hours being cut, interest rates rising, the price of everything rising, but yet, people are losing their jobs. So it's concerning, but you have to remember that the economy always goes in cycles and waves. Like you have a cycle like this, but at some point it's going to rebound. So it's temporary. But I mean, I know if you're going through it, if you're the one who just lost your job, me saying that probably doesn't make you feel better. Or maybe it does, knowing that, eventually it's going to ride its way out. There's hope. Yeah. And you just have to, unfortunately, just, hang tight and know that the tide is going to turn, because the economy goes through these different cycles. We have, upswings, we have downswings, then you got another upswing. So it's like a wave.
Okay. I like it. All right. So here's the question that's going to lead into the final four. It's not the final four question that leads into it. So you've shared a lot. You shared a lot in terms of your journey to becoming the person you are today, the work you do in the community, etc. What's one thing that people don't know about you that you wish they knew?
Wow, that's interesting. That's a good question. I would say, people will probably look at me, in the exterior, the paper, right? The resume, the exterior, the physical things. Oh, the car she drives or the clothes she wears, whatever, right? And think that life has always been a crystal stair for me, as Langston Hughes would say, right? And it hasn't. I've gone through a lot of struggles in this process of becoming, right, as Michelle Obama would say. And know that, everybody goes through valleys that you don't know about. Everybody fights battles that you don't know about. And I'm no exception to that rule. So I'm an overcomer. I would say that.
Awesome. I love it. So tell me this. First question of the final four. If you're going to have dinner with anyone alive or dead, there's four chairs at the table. You're in one. You can either have three others or four others who will sit down at your table. Who and why?
I mean, do they have to be like famous people? Is that what you're getting?
It could be anybody. It could be your neighbor. It could be the mailman.
It could be your auntie's cousin's daughter. Anybody.
We had one lady said, "I don't want no one at the table. I want to eat by myself." And that was fair.
I'm gonna go that route. 3 other people at my table. I would
Who and
have
why?
my dad. Like I mentioned, my dad
Awesome.
passed away from cancer when I was in undergrad.
Hmm.
So it definitely have my dad at the table because now looking back, so I was 21 when my dad passed away, and now
Yeah,
I'm not
not 21.
Yeah. 31. 31.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I'm
Yeah.
older,
All right.
and
Okay.
there's
Yeah.
so many things that I reflect on now that I was like, man, if I could just talk to my dad about these things now, that conversation would be so good. He used to talk to me about different things, about like spirituality and positive thinking. And sometimes I'd be like, man, why is he talking to me about this complex stuff? I'm just a kid, but now reflecting, it's like, well, somebody, God knew he wasn't going to be here. So he had to put that in me early. And now I could actually like appreciate that, and really have that conversation with him. And so my dad would be one.
I love that.
The other would be, I would say Martin Luther King. Like, I just think his life is so fascinating, I would just love to know, like, why did you do this? Like, what made you lay your life down for this cause? Like, what were the things that you like kept you up at night, So I would say Martin Luther King and another person. Michelle Obama, probably. You said living or dead?
Yeah.
Okay,
Living or
Michelle
dead. Yeah, it
Obama.
didn't matter.
Like, I just love her persona. Like, I think she's, she has so much grace and she's so brilliant, but yet she's so down to earth, and she keeps it real, if I could say that. She keeps it real. So I think that would
she
be
does.
a great group of people to get together at my dinner.
Just a follow-up. Being a native Chicago person, have you ever ran into the Obamas? Have you met Barack or Michelle, or have you been in their circle?
Never.
Really? Wow.
I know
Okay,
people who
just
know
curious.
them and have met them, but
Hmm.
I've never met them or seen them. No. Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately. Not
Right.
yet.
Not
Not
yet.
yet. Not
Yeah.
yet.
What's been your greatest success?
That's a really good question. Your greatest success.
We can hear you pounding on the desk.
you made her nervous, Dre. You made her nervous.
I would honestly say my greatest success has been going through those valleys that I talked about that a lot of people don't know about, and coming out on the other side. Doing the work that you have to do, that, when you're in a dark place, that brings you back to the light, holding on and doing the work and fighting through it, pushing through it,
That's
yeah.
awesome. As the third final four question, Superman has his strength and he flies. The Hulk has his strength and Wonder Woman has her plane. And what is your unique superpower? Something that is uniquely you, that is your God-given superpower.
That's a good question. What is my superpower? I think one of my strengths is being able to connect with people. I think I do that quite naturally and quite easily, and not everybody can do that. So I would say connecting with people, relating with all different kinds of people.
Yeah, I pick up on that, and my guess is that the reason that is because of your upbringing, right?
I would think so.
So like you, I've lived in different communities where some communities were predominantly people that looked like me, and some communities that weren't anyone like me. There wasn't anyone like me. And so I think those of us that live in those types of communities, even Smiley, when he went away to college, he tells a number of different stories where he was like, let me not go off on a tangent here. But let me just say, you want to hear it? Smiley, go ahead. Tell her one of your stories from Dartmouth. Tell her any story you want.
No, I went to Dartmouth, and the thing about I found with Dartmouth is I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we were poor, but we didn't know we were poor. It was like the good times, Cabrini Green, and I always think that poverty is relative, because if everyone around you is living like you don't know any better, and then you attribute the people you see on TV as being, well, that's just TV. That's make believe. So I went to Appleton, Wisconsin, where I left all predominantly 100% roots community to a whole bunch of white people up in Appleton, Wisconsin, where there was no one that was like us. So it was totally different. Then I went from there, and the transition from Appleton to Dartmouth was the greatest, because I met a class of Black people that was wealthy, third generation, fourth generation college. And that was just a totally different thing. Here was people who looked like me, but they weren't economically the same. They didn't live like me, and they had they
didn't talk like him.
They didn't talk like me. And the thing that I found most amazing was, I said, "You live in a house without your grandmother? Well, where's your granddad? What do you mean? Your grandfather and grandmother got their own houses, and you know your dad's family and your mom's family on both sides." I would call my mother and say, "I don't understand these Black people. They got all types of. Why you need so many houses?
Somebody live in the house with
I was like, man, they know their fathers and grandfathers.
I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
I was in the Links. Are you familiar with the Links organization?
Yeah.
So I was a member of the Links for 10 years before I decided to leave. But that really exposed me to the type of people that you're talking about, right? They're Black.
It's a different
They're
world.
Black. And they look like me on the outside, but on the like the way they live, like in mansions, and they have like it's just on another level in terms of the wealth and the educational backgrounds and the vacationing at Martha's Vineyard. And I'm just like, hey, what now? Like, what?
The last quick story.
Down south to my grandma's house. Like, what? What? Your family did that every year since you were 2? Like, what?
Not the Greyhound bus.
The Greyhound bus with a fried chicken packed for lunch.
Okay. Yeah, it's like you stop on the side, but the one thing is, I remember I was a sophomore, and I was on the Dartmouth Gospel Choir, and we drove from New Hampshire to DC, because we were singing at Howard. And I was just sitting there. It was 45 of us on a bus, and I'm sitting there. We're riding through this neighborhood in DC. I'm like, man, if my family could live in a neighborhood like this would be amazing. Then I hear now the bus is all Black except the driver, and they're like, look, everyone, look, we're in the ghetto. Look, this is where the poor people live. And I'm like, I'm trying to get here. I looked around like, I'm trying to get my mom into the ghetto.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
And I just looked around like, I don't think I belong here.
These are not my people. Yeah.
I didn't belong on the bus.
Right. Exactly.
I know what you mean. It's funny.
That's funny. Yeah. Okay, so it's exposure. It's exposure, right? Let's talk about the top. Okay, so the last final 4 questions. So if you were to write a biography, an autobiography, what would the title be?
You guys are asking some really good questions.
Oh yeah. Welcome to the podcast.
What would the title be? That's such a good question. Man, that's such a good question. Wow. I don't know. Something I'm thinking about, like just rising. So maybe Phoenix, like a Phoenix, rising.
Phoenix.
I like it.
I like that.
Okay, Smiley.
Oh, this has been so exciting in the sense that you've taken the podcast to different areas. We've had,
Oh,
I think
yeah.
we're up to like 85 guests or et cetera. And I've never had anyone, but I've never had anyone say, well, we did the analysis for the dividends, or like what you talked about, the formularies in the healthcare. It's just, I mean, we could probably do an hour podcast on just every
Easily.
facet that you explained, from the Treasury Department. I haven't ever heard of a Treasury Department. I just felt like an old night.
Ago. I mean, I know I look young, but it was a while
But I mean, every one of the things that you talked about is a podcast, and even your life coaching
Yeah.
Well, thank
aspirations.
you.
So thank you, Yvonne, for taking your time on this weekend and
Well,
speak
thank
to
you.
us and to share your awesomeness with us. It's a fascinating life.
Oh, thank you guys. This has been a pleasure and a joy. Yeah, really has.
And just to piggyback on what Smiley said, it's one of the things I really enjoy, and I think Smiley does too, is that we have guests on that we kind of just connect with
Yeah.
naturally,
Mhm.
right? And you mentioned earlier that you kind of are able to relate to different people fairly
Mhm.
easily. It shows through.
Oh, thank you.
Your story is a great one. Your story is a great one. It's one that hopefully our listeners will find. The younger listeners are kind of trying to find direction, will be inspired by as
I
well.
certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. That would be great. So thank you guys for inviting me. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's made me think. It's made me laugh. Really enjoyed it.